Yeah, I think that's the most important that you usually end up wrapping up like user testing with. Like, what is your overall impression? There you go, that's the term. Your overall impression of this app. What is your overall impression of this experience? And then when you say that, people automatically get so confused. Like all the questions we didn't answer before were not about what we were doing. But it's, and what I always do, and again, going back to that level of empathy and making them feel heard and making, trying to get the most insight out of it, I say, this is really the most important question we ask. Because I want to know, would you leave this today and come back to it? Will you forget all about this? Will you delete this app 20 minutes after downloading it? You know, it's an important insight.
Actually, what I learned from one of my old colleagues is, he's like, his bread and butter is strategy and research. The last question that we asked and I've carried through is, if this existed tomorrow, would you use it?
Good question.
And
What do they say?
most of the time it's yes, thankfully. But that's more because of the team.
Yeah, and that's an interesting part too, because that's like when you know. That's when you know you have something. So if you're doing research while you're in the middle of designing something, if you're gaining insights while you're working through interactions in like a low fidelity wireframe, getting that yes, getting that validation that what you're doing and the story you told from even from an act perspective, because this is another pillar that we'll probably touch on quickly, but it's like how you tell a story in product, like inside the product itself. Like one of the things, my favorite phrase to say whenever I'm building a website for somebody, what's the story of the page? And then a client goes, I don't know what that means. And I'm like, oh, you're selling something, right? Like how are we gonna sell? What's the most valuable information that comes from this? Like what do you want people to know up front? Everything. No, not everything. We have to break it down to a story. I say, think of a movie trailer. Think of a book you've read. Like it has a narrative. It gets you hooked in at certain points. Like if there's an acquisition, you want people to buy something, buy a shirt, or like nobody understands why Amazon is successful. The entire UX is a mess. The whole site's a mess. It hasn't changed since like 1997. Why is it successful? It doesn't make sense. But even though there's still been UI changes and UX changes throughout the time that built the store. You know, sometimes it's frustrating. I want to see reviews. I want to see what people hate about this. Sometimes it's buried all the way down at the bottom, past things I want and a bunch of other stuff. But that's a whole other part of UX. But like, how does that all come into play, right? Like, how do we always make sure that somebody's engaged? Like a navigation. Navigation is the perfect example. Yes.
I was wondering if there's any best way to determine how many user tests per project versus, because I have this like global navigation redesign project where our intern did 5 people, and then they gave us like 5 different opinions, and we're just basing off that to redesign like this huge company. I felt like that's kind of weird. So how do you measure, or what is the best way to?
So it can be subjective. I think for that, I would go back to the script and how it was tested. It's typically the rule of thumb, even though major stakeholders still want 200 to 2,000 people, once you level set with 5 to 7 people, 5 to 7 tests, you will get kind of a trend. And
So it's not about the project. It's not about.
It might be kind of what Joe was saying before, where the sequencing of like impressions, and I would first take a look at that first, and then run the tests again until you start seeing a trend. But typically for us, once someone on our team runs a test, and we use usertesting.com where it's unmoderated tests, we run it, and 15 people, depending on how much
So you start small.
We start small, and then typically when we run it, I run it with one person, make sure the test makes sense, make sure that the person that's going through it makes sense to them, no questions or no errors, and then I run it again. And then if we have an ongoing Thursday meeting with the CEO and he's going to ask how many people do we need to speak to, then I run it 10 times so that I can hit critical mass in his purview. But typically, if you get 10 to 15 people, you would be able to kind of get that first initial trend
Yes.
Unfortunately, but since we were able to do the story and build it out, we've kind of brought him on to our side. And there is that dialogue. Like, he is the huge proponent of UX, but there's always like cost. There's have you thought about this? Well, we have this brand equity. Initially, we wanted to rebrand because a lot of people don't know PCH, and people that do know PCH have their own bias. But it goes back down to storytelling, where even today, most of the chunk of what I was going to present was we had a learn hub, and you wouldn't equate PCH and sweepstakes why you have a learn hub, and it's a lot of walkthroughs that you can learn and experience, learn the history of PCH, learn we actually do give prices out. People do win $5,000 a week for life, and it's forever. Where we're trying to change the quotations around that.
I was gonna say, why are you using air quotes? This is the shadiest thing I've ever heard.
That was our initial assumption, right? And it's in quotations because the copywriter that's been there for X amount of years is saying, well, it means that if something happens to you, then you can leave it to someone. And I'm like, well, that's a good thing. You're deterring it.
Yeah.
So it is that storytelling. It's being able to then take those insights and prioritize what you're going to work on. You're not going to, other than updating the visual design and making it more usable, you're going to pick and choose what you want to work on so that it benefits the user.
Yeah.
Because if I serve you an ad saying you can win a new MacBook or you can win $7,000, most people will click on that.
I have.
Yeah, our metrics, we have a lot of people that will click and convert on those, but the issue is retention.
Yeah.
So how can we keep people in, or just initially people that do not know PCH, and they want to know more. They want to be able to explore the site. They want to be able to look, learn the history, know that where they're putting their information is not going into like this void where it's going to get lost.
Well, that's all fine. And that's more storytelling. That's storytelling in product, right? Like making sure that people want to click on this one, understand what's going on there, making sure that, we're creating experiences. I had a great interaction with a client once where we're at the end of building the site. It was like 20-something pages. It was generally a small site. But all we had to do was get approval on terms and conditions, privacy policy, all the pages that nobody gives a shit about. And I was like, all right, guys, let's print, yada, yada, yada. Here's my thing. Go through the whole thing about why we did like terms and conditions in like a tighter format and why fonts are a certain way and all this stuff. And I was like, is there any questions? Which, by the way, get your questions loaded because we're going to be wrapping up shortly. He said, oh, wow. I've never been so excited about terms and conditions and privacy policy pages before. And I said, what? And he goes, you talked a lot about like UX on why the pages were built this way. And I'm like, well, yeah, I want you to know, I want you to be informed. And he's like, yeah. He goes, I want to kind of hear more about why you think from a visual standpoint it's easier to read this way. I'm like, oh, I can go on longer. And my boss is like, no, cut it off, Joe. We've had a privacy policy pages today. But that's the thing, right? Like, if you tell a good story, you can make fucking anything interesting. Like, and that's such a big benefit. And also, to the question about user testing, also what I do is very, very carefully curate the people who I am looking for. We talk more about user testing later at the bar. So while we have you guys still generally captivated, questions? Any questions? Did I miss anything? Yes.
I'm in product management, and I want to hear what are your expectations for product managers?
No, that's all you need.
To be a collaborator, really. A lot of designers that I've worked with, so it doesn't start with the negative, but like positive.
I'll start with it.
Well, no, collaborate is a positive, but I like to hear your thoughts. A lot of times working with product managers, most designers don't want to receive a sketch or something, but it helps kind where your thought process is, how you expect the functionality to be, and it's really collaborating. For us, in most of my career, I've worked with a close-knit community or a team where it is more like a symbiotic relationship of these are the needs that we want, and it's really looking for you to be a speaker for the user instead of saying, no, this is what I need without actually asking them for research. So it's more of like, ask me to do more work.
Okay.
Yeah, nothing else. I'm like, it's all collaboration, right? Like, in our job, we work with product people, executives, marketing people, developers, fucking bosses, everybody under the sun, right? So, our job is to be an understanding voice in the room. Like you said, if a product person or a developer comes to me and like, I got this great idea, I'm then gonna be like, excuse me, sir, I'm a UX designer. You have no opinion. I'm the one. I'll be like, oh fuck, tell me. And then they might tell me something and I'll be like, oh, you know, we actually tried that. And we brought it to user testing and it didn't do well. So that's the reason why we didn't do it that way. I've never really, the only time that I ever caught an attitude with a product person was when they sent me a Figma link and they used a design system and tried to be a designer. But I was like, listen guys, I love the energy. That's my favorite thing. It's like, love the energy or thank you so much. Like, that is great. I'm just gonna take this back and we're gonna look at it. So I think that's the thing, but it's like any other member of a team. As long as you're collaborative, as long as you like come with us with some type of insight and it's not orders. I think that's also a big thing. Like even for us, like we should be telling people this is right because I'm the expert in the room. We have knowledge behind it. We have experience behind it. Like I've done too many websites to even count, but I have a wealth of experience. I keep up on trends. Like that's also another thing. Like I keep up on everything that's going on. So I think it's definitely a lot to process of being a team member. But just be empathetic. Be empathetic. That's how I like it. What else we got? We had somebody in the back.
Yeah, do you have insights on how to influence stakeholders that aren't bought into your designs or ideas?
That's fun.
Hard-hitting questions. That's gonna happen, right? Like, we all know opinions are everywhere. Not everybody's gonna love what you like. I had a call today where some executive was like, this form is so boring. And I'm like, yeah. I'm like, it's 63 form fields about insurance. This is, it's pink. And nice typography. There's icons. Like, I don't know what you want from me. He's like, I want it to be eye-catching. And then I had to say, listen, I understand what you're saying, but the goal of what we need to do is to keep users on a path to fill out this long, ridiculous, annoying form that nobody wants to do, but they want to do it because they want insurance, right? So we want to keep them on the path. We don't want them to be distracted or caught off guard by an image. Like, I love imagery, don't get me wrong, but like in certain areas it doesn't belong. And I said, we just need them to complete the form. He goes, oh, that makes sense. And then put himself on mute. And then it was just dead air for like a good solid 30 seconds. And I'm like, all right, call's over, right? Like, that's literally a blocked out a half hour meeting for that one question. So, but that's the thing, right? Like you have to come with everything you know. And if they still fight you, then you have to go get your research out. And if they still fight you, be like, listen, we can just test this. You have your choice. We can do usertesting.com. We can have people come in person. We can do an A/B test online, which I would also suggest for the global nav, and see what the users actually think. I have a whole long story that went on for like 2 years at American Express of testing an experience where people were not buying it, and that's a whole other thing. But that's what you have to do.
Something else that you can do that is more of within the evangelizing is having what we call lunch and learns.
Oh, lunch and learns. Yes. Oh God, I love doing that.
Where you just pick a topic. Most of the time you'll pick it from the questions that you're being asked throughout that week, throughout the sprints, where people are understanding where the decisions are coming from, and it's just pulling those Nielsen links, some dribble stuff that's good, where you're like showing them this is like the process.
Yeah.
Even if you're just going all the way down back to the UX process, but having those lunch and learns and being able to kind of quantify where we've had these, we've kind of tried to communicate with people, and you'll have people like join.
Yeah, and the lunch learns are very important amongst education, right? You work in an org, somebody asked a question, you work in an org that people don't understand, right? Like, they don't know what the hell we're doing here. The ironic thing, for anybody who's old enough to remember, when we were graphic designers and we worked in like big companies, we were like the weird kids who showed up in like, you know, t-shirts and shorts during the summer, and everybody else is in shirts and ties, and like, who are those people? They're creative. The creative department in the back, you're gonna love them. Wait, you'll hear the music, don't worry. To now, like, still having that level of influence. Like, when you tell somebody, like, this is what you're doing. Like, I'm here to look at, like, again, selling UX. Selling UX, it's a big part. And UI and design, because people think that we're here just to make buttons. And I love buttons, but there's so much.
I was gonna say that as before the product management question, don't send me a ticket, just create a button.
Yeah, no. We have a design system for buttons, all right? There's no new buttons. We're not making buttons red, you know, because that's bad, red's bad. Unless it's really part of your brand color and you feel that strongly about it. But it's a lot of what we do, right? So as you tell people, do these little, and it costs nothing. You tell people, grab lunch, come hear me talk about something, present something captivating, maybe a case study that you might see. You know, as much as I hate writing case studies, it's still something great to present to people. You got your hand up over there?
Two things.
Yes.
One, here to see about Amex, because I think we're there around the same time.
Nice.
Two, this might be off tangent, but to obtain talent, do you have advice on how to formally carve a path for people that just want to focus on IC work, individual contributor work, for both research and design, instead of pushing them to do management?
The IC versus management question. There's always one person who likes this.
Yeah.
What do you think?
So your question was retention, right? How do you keep people on?
Do you have any advice on properly carving out the staff IC, like so Shopify, LinkedIn, Google has really carved out paths for people that want to focus on IC work and not management? So do you have any advice on how to like carve out properly? Or just even, it's gonna be, you know, a little rocky in the beginning, but at least it's gonna grow now.
I think it's very subjective to the company and the budget and what your goals are as far as monetary goals. You can go either route. You will learn quickly whether or not you want to manage a team versus be in Figma all day. And I think part of that, what I try to do, even though most of the companies that I've been part of don't have it from the onslaught, is having OKRs, having kind of personal goals. And then once you identify what those goals are, if you're trying to do it for yourself or for a direct report, then you can kind of see what their interests are and try to guide them towards that path. But it's also exposing them to both levels, right? So if you're able to hire interns, then you can have them kind of lead a project, but also manage this intern, or just give them a whole project to own from start to finish, and see where they land, or see where you land.
This is what I call pillar 6, management storytelling. It's true though, because like he's saying, retention's a hard thing, especially now. Market's hot, we all know it. I'm sure inside everybody's email box while we've been here, you got at least one order from one offer from some kind of recruiter from Meta for like $350,000 for like them owning your soul. So keep an eye out. But like part of our job as we mature as leaders, right? We have to make sure that story of a person, the second they walk in that door, we know what they want to do. And they can try both, they can figure out what they want to, what their tenure track is. And again, much like the research we do for anything else, there's tons of information. You said LinkedIn, Airbnb, Google, they all have a track. Does it work for you? I think Apple's websites are fucking banging. They have a lot of interactivity. Can I do that for anything? No. Like their design is for that product and it works out really well. Would I do that for like a salad shop? Probably not, because that's a lot of just loading parallax salads. But it's like, remember when you hire somebody, like they're here for a reason, right? Like when you guys take a job, nobody should leave a job after you. I'm just gonna say it. I think it's, you guys don't learn enough in a year. I think there's so much more to learn. By like 6 months, you're getting your feet like deep in the sand, and then by a year, you're ready to fucking take off. So if you take a job, again, when you're interviewing, ask the leader, like what's their goals for you? You know, I think we should all set our own goals, we all have a personal journey, yada, yada, yada. It sounds like I'm selling fucking essential oils and crystals to everybody, but it's true. Like, as I hire a designer, I know that you're gonna come here, you're gonna learn. I'm a big proponent in hiring young people right out of college because I want you with no bad habits and a fire in your ass to fucking go and be the best. You know, so I'm gonna tell you this is where you're gonna be, and at this point you're gonna be here, and at this point you're gonna be here. And if all goes well and you don't leave, you're gonna go here. And if I don't leave, you're gonna go even further. So, you know, I think that's also like identifying what they want, you know? And you see it as people go. Like, if you say like, oh, do you wanna lead this meeting? And they're just like, maybe. Or if we're like, oh, we'll get you somebody to work like along with you, like you'll mentor them and like help them along, they may be like, you know, I'd rather just kind of throw, and this is back when we were all in the office, headphones on, designers would just be like dead to the world, people would just see, you know, heads bobbing and a fucking productive group of people, and then there's one person that's like, hey guys, why don't we go out and do something? Let's learn something.
So I've seen a lot of new roles now for product design manager. If you look into those, there's a lot of them now actually on LinkedIn. But I can also, and I look afterwards, one of my friends is like a recent product design manager, and I actually haven't even asked her that much in like what her day is. But I think it's more of that just overseeing high level OKRs for the team and then managing like a group of designers.
Yeah. So we're getting the light. If anybody knows stand-up comedy, that means it's time to get the fuck off stage. I'm not going to speak to both, but this has been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for coming out. You want to stand up here while you talk? Yeah, let's do that. Let's just look weird. Yeah.
Sure. Everyone give Joe and Aldo another round of applause.